This is Theory of Change. I'm Matthew Sheffield. Thanks for joining me for another episode. In the aftermath of every presidential election, a flood of analysis pours in the day after, but actually the real data takes a lot longer to come in. And now, several months after the fact, nearly a year actually, all of the most serious validated voter studies have come in. And they have some interesting findings for the losing party, the Democrats. And one of the things that has become apparent from all of these analyses is that the Republican Party's leadership and political consultant class has a lot more modern political strategies that fit within the social media age. And joining me today to talk about how both parties are adapting or not adapting to the social media age is my friend Rynn Reed. She is a political strategist and also the founder of Creator Congress, which is a new group that is connecting progressive content creators and influencers and getting them to have services and have connections to each other and to political actors. And in our discussion, we talk about the 2024 election and how the Democratic Party and its allied groups spent almost all of their money on media on television ads, despite the fact that many Americans do not watch television news and do not have advertising because they fast forward it. And they are getting their news from YouTube or TikTok and other places like that. And we also talk about how right-wing Americans have done much more to fund cultural products that are not necessarily political, but have deep political undertones. And that this is a way of establishing branding for the Republican Party and people like Donald Trump in particular, in a way that the Democratic Party has never really invested in. This is a serious issue for Democrats because Donald Trump's 2024 election victory was largely thanks to people who had never voted before or who rarely do vote, and that they had the idea to vote for Trump because of the advocacy media or the cultural conservative product that they consumed on a regular basis, and which told them you shouldn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's an extremist. Theory of Change is part of the Flux Media Network, so go to flux.community for more podcasts and articles about politics, religion, media, and society, and how they all intersect and affect each other. And if you want to go directly to the archives of this program, just go to theoryofchange.show, where we have the video, audio, and transcript of all the episodes. And if you are a paid subscribing member, thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it. And we have options at Flux on both Patreon and also on Substack. Whichever one you prefer, you can get the same content. We have free options as well, so please do connect with us there. And make sure to subscribe if this is your first time listening on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube. Thanks a lot. And joining me now is Rynn Reed. Hey, Rynn, welcome to Theory of Change.
Hey, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a fun discussion. And I think, the topic that I've been thinking a lot about lately is that, after the year after an election, basically, as that a lot of research organizations come out with validated voter studies, and it takes so long because the states, they take a long time to get all their records released and the voter registration things. And so now there's been I guess 6 or 7 publicly released ones and from various organizations, and everybody has their takes, but they do kind of line up in a lot of similar ways, in some sense. And sometimes these ideas contradict the exit poll data, but a lot of times they don't. And this year, I don't feel like there was a lot of contradiction. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I don't think that. I think the exit poll felt pretty aligned with the data that we were seeing, or at least the takes I was listening to about the reports. I mean, I think it's really difficult to tease out. Something that I've just been thinking about a lot is teasing out the focus on the Electoral College and the states we needed to win, whether it was in the Sun Belt or the Blue Wall, and how that can discourage voters. I think especially after Trump's election in 2016, losing the Electoral College but winning the popular vote, like 2 things happened. I think it discouraged voters that might have turned out otherwise, and I think it led to some of the suppression this time. I just think people were like, well, what's the point if I'm not in one of these places? Like, the electoral college is all that matters. And then I think like what we lose there is momentum. We don't have like, we handed Trump a mandate, not really, but like perceptively because he won the popular vote. But I think a lot of that had to do with some of the messaging tactics. And I think it's really hard to tease out the effects of the polls and what happened after with like how we messaged and where we targeted.
Yeah, well, and I think the other kind of side effect of the way that the Harris campaign and its various allies did their spending and focus is that because they did focus overwhelmingly on the swing states, that it didn't buck up a lot of these congressional candidates, and so those people, who. And obviously, I mean, all the studies do indicate that the non-voters would have supported Trump more this year. But on the other hand, if you focus specifically on your select people who do like Kamala Harris, at least, somewhat, there probably are some House races that were lost. I think that's pretty clear, especially in New York and California.
Yeah, and what I heard on the ground from these races are people that were supporting in congressional races as they were being completely ignored by the spends and by kind of by the party writ large. So I think that is really interesting to me. And I think there's some like counter data that's really interesting. There was a really good citations needed episode on this where they sort of cover some of the exit polling and what might have been missed in that non-voter account and how actually difficult it is to say how a non-voter would vote. It's worth a listen. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, because it is. Yeah, I mean, it is studying the non-voter. It is tricky because a lot of times they are more likely to say that they supported the winner of the race than they actually might have been, or they don't really have firm opinions,
and that's something they got into a little bit. It's like when we're talking about especially like young male voters, like how firm their opinions are at any given time, or young people kind of generally, like overwhelmingly up until this election, young people have swung tremendously to the left, especially during Trump's first election. And like young voters just have very polarized opinions. They're still forming their thoughts. I think there's not a like hard set group that we can just be like, yes, this is how they're going to vote throughout their lives and going forward.
Yeah. Although, I mean, there is some research that does kind of indicate that people who, that your political opinions when you were young kind of are a bit more fixed for a lot of people than they might otherwise want to think.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I feel like mine shifted pretty dramatically or like had lots of like iterations or add-ons. But...
I mean, well, mine certainly did, but
sure.
Tell me what you mean in your context.
I mean, I think, I was just reactionary. I think I called myself like a Chomsky libertarian at some point. I was very like, what do we need government for? Like, mutual aid is the way, things like that, and kind of like bucked systems or would have been like a third party supporter until I started working in politics and kind of realized the limits of my own ideologies and had to kind of reassess and figure out where power structures were and how to be a good, good soldier in that way.
And to actually take politics seriously.
Yeah. Like actually
as a matter of policy.
Like affect change.
Yeah. Well, and that, like that is definitely a huge problem of Republicans that they, and having been one, I can say that most of them know almost nothing about policy, and so and Donald Trump is a perfect example of that. He's a guy that probably, I mean, obviously had some racist attitudes and things like that, but in a lot of ways was just kind of a conventional New York resident, kind of not against the government, and probably, for it overall. But and so, he was kind of a moderate Republican. At least if you look at when he very first came on the scene, there were two groups of people who supported him, and it was the anti-immigration people, and then it was moderate Republicans. That's the irony. That was an attraction for some people for Trump, and it still continues to be. Like I've seen a number of polls over the years that a lot of people even now still think that Donald Trump is more that he's less conservative than most Republicans. Even though it's very clear now that he just does whatever the far right Republicans tell him to.
But I mean, isn't that partially? I mean, about like the kind of establishment versus non-establishment? Like they can kind of like Rorschach test and project onto him the versions of things that they want to see because he doesn't fit an archetype of politician.
Yeah, well, and that's and I think that's a huge part of it, but also just his rhetoric that he talks about, and that like and you can even see it on this budget bill that the Republicans have been working on for so long, that just recently, as we're recording this on the 3rd of July, that he had said the day before on the 2nd of July that I always tell Republicans, you don't touch Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And then somebody was like, but wait, we are touching Medicaid.
Yeah, and I think this term in particular, I've noticed his like slides into like kind of cogent speech, especially around like Iran and Israel, was really interesting. The kind of decisiveness of his media appearances versus the bill where he kind of like weaves and ducks and is not just won't commit to anything. The Republicans in general have actually been really good about this. We were trying to like find clips of them saying they wouldn't cut Medicaid, and they were very strategic, very aligned, and never said those words.
The other thing that I think hasn't really been talked about in some of these studies is that that is the role of television advertising in Democratic campaigns versus Republican campaigns. It's just insanely disproportionate that Republicans put their money a lot more in digital, a lot more in media, like for produced media, advocacy media, whereas Democrats tend to dump everything into two buckets usually, which is TV ads and on the ground door-to-door knocking. And within political science, both of those things are pretty clearly not effective. And like that's it, there's just this weird irony, tragic irony of democratic politics in that there are so many political science professors, who lean democratic, and yet the party doesn't actually learn anything from them. It seems like.
I feel like it's such an outsourcing to like the consultant class too. I mean, we just have these like deeply like entrenched consulting class that just refuse to learn and have no real impetus to. I can't totally track the difference because I'm just like don't understand the Republican side as well, but I do feel like we have more consultancies that do really non-innovative stuff and just refuse to kind of update their priors. We'll have mail campaigns sending out, and this we saw this with like Ocasia's race, right? Like AOC's race when Crowley sent out like 25 mailers or something, like some kind of absurd amount, and they just weren't clocking. They weren't clocking where to go with things, and I think I've seen mail firms doing that up to this day and just kind of burning their clients' money a little bit. And at Cuomo's race too, right? I was seeing that although Mamdani actually put a ton into TV ads, which I thought was really interesting. I think it was like 70% of his race, of his spend.
Yeah, although he did a lot of produced.
But then a lot of earned media and a lot of like digital. So he kind of like made up the difference with free media.
With regard to the Republican consulting class, it is different that things changed because of Donald Trump. Because when he first came on the scene, pretty much all of the Republican consultant class hated him because they thought he was a liberal, a rhino. That was actually like people forget that that's what never Trump was originally for most of these people. It was that he was a rhino and Republican in name only, and a liberal who's going to betray the party and make them get in league with the Democrats.
Sure.
So they wouldn't work for him. But also Trump hated them as well, and so basically this sort of calcified layer of Republican consultants, he threw them out in the street. And he had brought in these people who were state level operatives, basically like Corey Lewandowski or Susie Wiles, and so they had no priors, to use your wording for it, and so they were willing to do whatever seemed best, or to import techniques that they learned from commercial marketing, and because commercial marketing doesn't work the way that especially presidential campaign marketing works.
Yeah.
They figured out a long time ago that TV ads, all they do is establish branding. That's all they really are for. They establish prestige, but they don't motivate or persuade. They just sort of remind people that you're there. And so, yeah, so now the Republican consultant class is this entirely new wave of people who are, they're not set in their ways. They haven't been doing the same stuff since the 80s or 90s. And this is why they've been able to, like they were able to see, like in the Trump campaign they were open about this in 2024, that, our goal here is going to bring in non-participate, people who don't traditionally vote. And we're going to be focusing on young men in particular, and and beefing up Trump's numbers among Hispanics and Black people. And
Yeah.
they did it. They said they were going to do it, and then they achieved what they said they were going to do. And it's not like Democrats couldn't see that coming, because it was in the New York Times, seems like every few weeks, and Politico and everywhere else, right?
Totally. Well, and it's an interesting thing. I think what they seem to really understand, and to your point about like investing in TV ads being like just presence in the media space, Democrats are always kind of just about presence and never about persuasion, where I feel like that second tier, the sort of like digital media, new media tier where people can actually be moved one way or another, that's really where Republicans have just dumped all of their investments. That feels like kind of the constant um, hum of where they've invested since, I don't know, 2014, 2015.
Yeah, that, and I think that's right. And I remember back when I was a Republican consultant, I wrote a big long article saying that you guys need to stop trying to beat the media. You need to be the media.
Sure.
And then I just added up like all the audience size of Fox News and these various things, and I was like, look, you guys have nothing. No one sees what Republicans are talking about. And then I went and left the Republican Party, and they followed my memo.
They really did pick that up. People see what they're talking about now more than anything the Dems are doing, where they just can't see them. It doesn't matter what they do. It's just their presence. And the more that they are present, but like the Republicans have turned people against them, it actually just creates like a irritating factor, like a fly buzzing around. I just, they can't puncture it right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it's and they don't understand that in politics after the Great Recession, the zeitgeist is 100% for well, maybe not 100%, but like the vast majority of Americans think that the financial system sucks. They think that the getting a job sucks. They think that paying for food sucks, and or dating, and whatever all these things are basically have been taken over by extractive capital that is trying to financialize everything, trying to monetize everything. Um, and so people hate that, and Republicans seem to understand that, uh, but and of course they don't want to do anything about it, and if anything, what they do makes things worse, for financialization. And like they got just in their bill, they're trying to make it so that states can't regulate AI,
Yeah.
for 10 years, a moratorium on it. And I mean, this is just one of many things. um, So it's but Democrats are the Democratic brand is they haven't understood that people they don't see things in terms of the issues necessarily. They see how you talk to them and your overall vibe, if you will.
Yeah, no, one of the most interesting things from this, like the passing of this bill, was the public lands giveaway. And I feel like I just saw so many people online talking about how it was great and they should like sell it to do an auction, and like generally average citizens should be able to auction and purchase this land, and then also complaining in the same breath about, the cost of going to the land and wanting to roam on it freely, and how it should be open to the American public. And it's like those two things are completely at odds, right? Like an auction off to normal citizens, and like free roaming and like access, and just this like weird, like, oh, the government shouldn't control it, even though the government's the people. Like, people don't think about policy that deeply. They truly, they're not putting those two parts together. And I don't think that's even like, people will say, oh, the American public is just stupid. And I really think it comes down to like a level of rational ignorance and just distrust. They don't want to listen because they've been burned so many times and they've been talked down to. And yeah, I don't think the Democrats have like nailed that at all. And the Republicans have like nailed the presentation of it, even if they haven't actually changed any of the policies. They're just pushing the same
Mm.
thing from
Yeah.
1954.
Yeah. Well, and and Trump is able in a lot of ways to just to circle back to something we were talking about earlier, that, he's able to kind of get away with being seen almost as not a politician, almost as not part of the very laws that he himself is enacting and bullying Congress into signing,
Yeah.
because he's so good at deflecting blame and saying, well, anything. I mean, it is literally the Trump public posture that anything that is popular, I did it, and anything that's unpopular, someone else did it.
Yeah.
Um, and Democrats never say that, and never point out just the naked cynicism of it all. And they and it's not like they don't know that. Like, they all know that that's what he's doing, and they'll say that privately, and they might say that in an occasional podcast discussion, or if they're on, I don't know, Bill Maher's show or something like that. Like, they might say it in those venues, but they don't understand, like, that's an insight that the public would love you to tell them.
Yeah. I think there's a treating the public like children in our messaging. I think there's a lot of like talking down to, or I really like the phrase, we talk like about the working class, not to the working class. We kind of treat it like an anthropological study when we talk about people or voters. And I don't think it works. I don't think people like it. And I think Trump has just really nailed that sort of attention grabbing and talking to people in a way that they feel heard and seen.
Yeah. Well, and then of course, independent of him, they spend so much money on media, on advocacy media. So even if you might not like him very much, because I mean, like, that's one of the things that I noticed in the exit poll was that when you looked at people, so they asked him, do you approve of Trump? Do you approve of Harris? And there were people, a pretty sizable number of people who didn't approve of either one.
Sure.
And Trump won that vote, and like, so basically, and that's what advocacy media is doing, I think, because it's essentially like, obviously, that Republicans are less extreme than the Democrats, but a lot of people actually have been inundated with that message
Sure.
so much that they actually really believe that. And I mean, the only caveat, though, is, in a lot of these analyses is that, and I do want to make sure we talk about it, is that, like, the particular candidates, sometimes I think people, it's easy to draw these broader conclusions that may not be fully relevant in light of who the candidates were. So,
Oh yeah.
you know,
What's your example?
well, I mean, just like with Trump and Harris. So Harris, as a woman, I mean, studies have persistently shown that people think that women candidates are more left wing.
Sure.
than they are. And so just by virtue of her being a woman, that itself might have made people think she was more extreme. Some people, and then whereas with Trump, with these non-voters or non-regular irregular voters, unlikely voters, the fact that he's a famous celebrity and has been for decades, that might have some a significant cachet for him uniquely that no other Republican candidate can match. At least, unless they pull, a Tucker Carlson or a Kid Rock out of their hat in 2028 or something.
Yeah, the Tucker Carlson beef was really interesting during the conflict with Iran. I'm curious like how that landed with you or what you think was happening. Where there's just like that real tension with like Ted Cruz of kind of advocacy media turning on the Trump administration. And it was just an interesting like who has the power here, who wins out at the end. And I think it was a real like game of chicken for a while there.
Yeah, it was. And then, then Trump, in the end, just was like, well, we're going to bomb him. I mean, it was such a complete waste of time
Yeah,
because like, and they even admitted beforehand, that one of the places of the nuclear sites was already so far underground that they didn't even bother putting the bunker busting bombs in that. They just sent some Tomahawk missiles from a submarine.
jeez.
So, and it was like, that's where all the uranium was. So nothing of any like some stuff was destroyed at these other sites, but you didn't really do anything. And they knew that going into it. Like that's,
Yeah.
but again, like that's not something I hear Democrats saying. Not really, I mean, have you seen that?
The challenging of it.
The challenging that it was just didn't even accomplish what he said it would accomplish.
No,
That
I
there,
mean they got when they did kind of breach that. I believe the pushback they got was like, do you not honor the men and women who were like executed this mission? And then we back down. We kind of like we get one little hit, you get one punch on the jaw, and we sort of crumble.
Mhm.
And we did not follow that all the way through.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is one significant thing with the way that Republicans, so, Democrats seem to, what you're saying, like with the, like they want to make the point one time
Yeah.
and then they think that that's enough.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, if you listen to Trump, Trump's been saying the same thing for 10 years. The immigrants are coming to kill you and take your jobs. And, and the Democrats they're trying to make all your children transgender and transgender communists who, worship black people or something like that. Uh,
Sure.
that's the message. They've had the same message for 10 years. I think the Democratic leadership class and consultant class, they look at that and they just roll their eyes at it
Yeah.
instead of realizing, well, actually, that's extremely effective. So you can think it's dumb and you can think that, it's manipulative or whatever you want to think about it. But you know what? It works because a lot of people don't pay attention. And so if you have to repeat yourself a lot.
Yeah, I was listening to like I think it was Chris Hayes and Ezra Klein, and they were talking about like mimetic policies or these like policies that have just like kind of grand sweeping ability to say a lot of things at once, like build the wall or I don't know. But build the wall is like the big one that kind of sticks out. Is this very textural policy proposal that's not really a policy, but just a meme that you can just share forever. Um, and we don't really do those. We sort of like hem ourselves in. We're like, oh, like, this built the wall. It's too simple. It's not a real policy. But then he executed on it, right? Like at the end of the day, like Trump has delivered on the promises he's made to people in a lot of ways. He's in terrifying ways, in ways that are deeply unconstitutional. But I think those things, when you are able to bring the people with you, when they're able to like say what your points are really simply and iterate it, you build this sort of outside amplification network that allows you to move things forward outside of, compromise and legislative like organizing.
Mhm.
which is just really interesting and something the Democrats have really never done. They've always relied on sort of internal, like, well, we have to win over the coalition, we have to win over this power player, and sort of like all this backroom organizing, where I think Trump and his ilk and like this kind of new branch of the Republican Party rely on external factors. They rely on advocacy media. They rely on their own base to amplify their message and sort of push it through because they
Yeah.
remember it, because it's textural and like sticks with them.
Yeah. Well, and that idea of having having a message that is simple enough and just discreet enough that your own voters become the messengers. Like
Yeah.
that's what viral marketing is.
Yeah.
Like if you're launching a new a new makeup brand or a new clothing line, obviously you're going to enlist celebrities for it, right? But there's people only know pay attention to celebrities so much,
Yeah.
right? And and even if you love a particular celebrity and you're obsessed with them, if she takes a picture in some pants or something, there's no guarantee you would see that, even if you're obsessed with that particular celebrity. And so they have to do more than that, and which is why that they invest in giving free products to people, and then let them say whatever they want about it. And that influencer, like that is the influencer model,
Yeah.
and Democrats really have not kept pace on that at all. And well, and it's also that besides the fact that that people have actual contact with these influencers or micro influencers, it's also that they have more credibility, because of course a fashion brand is going to tell you that their new line of jeans is awesome.
It's the best line. Yeah.
And of course, a celebrity who's being paid to tell you that these jeans are amazing, of course she's going to say that they're amazing, right? So they don't have inherent credibility. Now, whereas the micro influencers, and even if some of them are on the take, and like that's that is its own issue perhaps, and arguably for the FEC or something, but but to just to the people who like watching somebody because they love her takes on I don't know, Real Housewives of New Jersey or something.
Yeah.
And and she makes a little comment, oh, and I just got these really cute pants, they're awesome. Like that means a lot more from her.
And there's a lot of good research on this. And I think the Democrats have still not totally caught up. Because even a lot of the creators I've loved as they've been kind of roped into the Democratic establishment, I think their message just gets less and less salient over time. You kind of become like, well, are you saying this because you actually believe it? Or are you saying this because you work directly with the Democrats and this is what they're telling you to say? Which I think is a real problem. We don't work with creators the way that the right does, because they really people are bought in. There's an ideological project there where they bring people in from high school, college, and I think they have a lot of true believers. And I know that that's not true across the board, but I think they do create true believers first, and then
I knew, yeah,
amplifiers second. And I don't think that's the direction that that Democrats broadly go in.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And and the other thing that is, I think, worth talking about here for us is that about public perception and the issues, because there after a losing presidential election, it's interesting how each party kind of handles the loss, because in the Republican side, they almost there are some people that it will be like, oh, it was this issue that lost us or that, but generally they don't have that conversation. Generally, what they say after a loss was, well, lately now they claim it was stolen from them, but
Yeah.
but aside from that obvious lying and whining, usually what they do is talk about tactics and strategies. That so they don't say, oh, we need to reevaluate our policies. They say, no, we need to change, what we're doing and how we talk about them, or where we talk about them, and who we're targeting. That's what they do.
Yeah.
You don't see these right wing pastors being like, well, all right, that's it.
Pack it up.
Packing up. this whole Jesus was a fraud. He wasn't real. I was lying to y'all. That's not what they're doing. And so, they change the strategies and they focus on that. And whereas for Democrats, after a loss, there's just these drag out policy debates, and they're like, it was, and each side of the equation is like, it's your fault. It's your policies that made us lose. It's
Yep.
your, and these are again are not supported conclusions, because if policy was the number one thing for voters, Republicans would never win elections.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
that simple.
I had this conversation a few weeks ago with one of my superiors, and he asked me, like, should we have kept saying abolish ICE? Was it a mistake to like embrace that term back when it was like being used really like 2018, 2017? And I was like, well, that's not the right question, right? The question is, how should we have handled it tactically? Because if the right wing had been doing it, if they had had a phrase or an unpopular policy, they wouldn't have like backed down on the policy. They would have doubled down on how to make it popular, right?
Well, or they just wouldn't
Or just
talk.
or they just wouldn't, but they would like figure out how to get their way in another way, right? What we've seen is like when abortion was unpopular, they moved it, right? They moved it into contraception, or they moved it into the states. Like they were trying at the national level. They moved it. There's always like a tactical change, to your point, where I feel like the second we see something is unpopular, we just sort of like throw it
Drop it.
out and say, well, we'll just move further right on this issue and people will follow us.
Yeah. Yeah. And another example of that is like their anti LGBT stance that,
Exactly.
so none of them has changed their mind with regard to same sex marriage,
Right.
right? They all want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of them, probably want to make it a crime to be lesbian or gay. Like
Absolutely.
that's what they want. Like they haven't changed their opinions, and yet, if you talk to, I mean, hell, you talk to the average political reporter, they don't realize that,
Totally.
because Republicans, they just, so when they have an unpopular policy, they don't change their viewpoints. They just don't talk about
Sure.
it. That's primarily what they do, or they redirect it, as you were saying. So, like, with the anti same sex marriage viewpoint, instead of emphasizing that, they went after trans people.
Yeah.
And then when they whip that into a frenzy, then they can be like, oh, and by the way, we also hate lesbian and gay people.
Totally. Yeah. Then it becomes a question of like gender checking and kind of chasing that rabbit down further.
Well, and grooming,
And
because
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. No. Exactly.
because we all know that, just being exposed even for a second to someone who's a lesbian is going to make you a lesbian.
Right.
We know that this is a
And
fact.
that case will be so much easier to make after like years of anti-trans sentiment. I use this analogy a lot when I was a humble organizing door knocker. One of the things they teach you is to get a few yeses before you make an ask. And I think the Republicans are really good at this. They'll like set up kind of like very simple, inductive, logical blocks that you're kind of like, okay, I get it. I'm like here with you. And then they make a leap. And by the time they make that leap, you've already said yes a few times. And it's kind of like you set the stage for yourself to agree with them. And the opposite of that, what the Democrats often do is they'll start from like a deductive place of like, oh, we all agree on this principle, ergo you should agree with this smaller point or this like principled point. But we're missing the fact that people don't agree with us on that principle at all. They've already been like, that principle point has been eradicated.
Yeah. Well, and it's also that Democrats often, like, they insist that people agree with their methods first.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah.
Before agreeing with their policy. So they're like, well, we all know that this is the sound form of epistemology. And it's like, the moment you're using that word in political rhetoric is the moment you've lost.
You lost. Yeah, you've already like put yourself in a place where you have to defend that first principle that you're working from. And if you're in a place of defensiveness, you've already lost. Like you don't have that like space to kind of argue and engage. And what's so interesting is we saw this with their meme warfare from Russians in 2014, 2015. And I feel like the right wing actually ended up adopting a lot of these tactics. There's this great piece or like a study from Nebraska about the Internet Research Agency and how the tactics they use to influence the elections. Um, and yeah, so it's like they studied it from 2014 to 2018, and this piece came out in 2019. Very like highly recommend. It was a good read.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll put it in the show notes if you can
Yeah,
dig it
yeah,
up.
I'll send it to you.
But with the issues, though, so like people have their different positions, and it is probably true that some positions might be liabilities or whatnot, right? But the other reality is that both the centrist side and the progressive side, both sides actually have policies that the public doesn't like,
Sure.
and both sides have policies that the public does like, and so really, and like people who are progressives like to rag on Rahm Emanuel, uh, and because he's done a lot of things that I mean he's very opposed to progressives, right? But on the other hand, he is a good campaigner. Like the guy knows how to win elections, and so in some sense, I think if you compare and contrast him with Zohran Mamdani, who just won the primary of the mayors in New York. Like both of these guys have completely opposite political viewpoints, but they both understand how to tap into this dissatisfaction of the zeitgeist. This dissatisfaction zeitgeist that everyone has in their own unique ways, and that's really what the message that people should be trying to learn in democratic politics, I think.
I think that's right. I mean, Mamdani is just such a generational communicator. I knew him as an assembly person and did not realize his game. He is so
Oh, I didn't
good
know that.
at
Okay.
seeing through sort of the questions being asked of him and directing them head on. And I don't know Raman. I don't know if I've watched Rahm Emanuel speak as much as I have Mamdani at this point. So I don't know if I can speak to his like efficacy as a communicator. But I think Zoran's like a generational talent. It's very very fun to watch him um, tackle points head on and feel like he's really connecting with the audience and not ducking and weaving and being kind of mealy mouthed about things. And I think that to me is modern politics is I just think it's not even just authenticity. It's like people need to know where you stand. I think you do need to make a stance on issues in some way, not even policies, but just like people need to know where you fit. And this
Mm-hmm.
kind of like hemming and hawing that the Democrats are so used to
Mm-hmm.
is
It's
not
not what people want.
it's
Yeah.
not what people want. Yeah.
On that point, though, like I think the reason why a lot of Democrats have these kind of hedging answers and kind of misdirections and whatnot, or trying to say not commit to anything, is that they're very poll driven.
Yeah.
And to like going back to what you were saying about the that they talk about the working class rather than to them or with them.
Yeah.
That for a lot of Democrats, they use polls as the way to understand what people think instead of just talking to them a lot.
Yeah.
And so as a result, a lot of the ideas that they have, they're data mirages is what I call it. That that they can point to some numbers and they can say, oh well, look, this ad that I tested was more effective than these three other ads, so therefore it's a good ad. And it's like, well, but there's an underlying assumption, and that is that TV ads work.
Yeah.
um, and the political science research is pretty unanimous and has been for decades that like my favorite study on this point was that a guy went and so when Rick Perry was the governor of Texas, 1 year he had no opposition in the general election, and so his team still wanted to run TV ads, though, because just for like brand projection and
Sure.
protection, and I guess they wanted to cash in too, probably. um, so they decided to do it anyway, and this political scientist, he was like, well, hey, can I just study those ads? There's no risk to you to let me see it, everything,
Yeah.
from top to bottom and how they work, and report it to the public, because you're not going to lose, man. What can you lose?
What
Right?
harm?
Yeah. So they let him do it. And what this guy found was, so this was the ideal environment for a television ad, that there was no opposition. Um, there wasn't really much of any other kind of campaign messages floating around. And so he didn't have people attacking him. The issue environment, there wasn't a lot of controversy going on. So when he put these ads out, what they found was that what the guy found when he talked to the voters is that the longest that any of them lasted in terms of a measurable effect on public opinion in this ideal environment
Yeah.
was 72 hours.
Wow.
That was
That's
it.
easy.
Yeah. And so, and that's the ideal environment. So what that suggests, is that probably they may have an effect like for an hour in a regular high controversy, high epistemic load environment, that they just have no impact. And I would say for Democrats, it's even worse for them though, because they don't have advocacy media,
Yeah.
that you can see 5 or 6 ads for Kamala Harris, 30-second spots. But then, you go and flip over on your YouTube and you've got Joe Rogan saying, "Oh, Kamala Harris, she's incoherent. She sucks in word salads, and she's an extremist." And sit here and you listen to him tell you that for 3 hours, 3 days a week, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that ad mean nothing to you, and if anything, as you were saying, it might have harmed her.
Yeah, because it's something like a lot of the data I saw out of like social media from last year is that the Democrats produce like 1 billion views, which is like absurd. That's like an absurd number. But when you think about it, like how many of those views were just reinforcing the points that the right wing was making? Like how many of them from our side were actually just like doubling down on something that people already believed from the right because they were hearing it so much more frequently. Like one thing from that kind of infamous now Media Matters piece that like stood out to me that I just feel like was never really talked about is that the right wing is just so much more frequent, right? We looked at the bubble graph and saw like the red wave, like all the bigger red accounts.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and I know we've talked about this before, is that like there's lots of accounts that are actually like Dem leaning that the Democrats never actually invest in or like speak with or engage with at all that are not reflected on that chart. And so there's that the Democrats just actually don't embrace this world at all and are now just trying to create their own accounts to fill the void instead of leaning into what exists. And then the second point is just frequency. There's like no investment or like understanding of it. The right is just constantly putting stuff out. It's like, I don't remember what the exact stat was, but it was like so much more content and so much more often. And we are just not prepared for that.
No, and like, I mean, and the whole idea of we need to have a liberal Joe Rogan, like it's a completely wrong. It's wrong thinking, is what it is, because number one, Joe Rogan wasn't created by the Republican Party. That's number one. So he has a personal brand authenticity and longevity in relationship with his audience. And then number two is that let's say you magically were able to create a liberal Joe Rogan, and from a top-down fundraising, like that's not possible. But let's say that it was, right.
Sure.
That there's one Joe Rogan, like he's one of like 500 right-wing media personalities. So even if you had a liberal Joe Rogan, that's not really going to offset all of these 500 other people. And that's just not how it works. And like Democrats, I think a lot of the Democratic consultant class or we'll say leadership class, that they think that as you were saying, that you can just create these top down things, and not accept your own voters' ideas and engage with them directly, and in an authentic way, because it's okay if they don't agree with 100% of what you say. Because guess what? Joe Rogan doesn't agree with everything Donald Trump says, and neither does Tucker Carlson, as we said. Like people. That's the other aspect of authenticity that you can't get through a political party anointing media figures. and it's why it's real because, and again, like it's dumb and like misogynist and, all those things. I agree with that. Whatever bad thing you want to say, I'll check the box right next to you about them. But, it's still authentic, at least in some sense, that they believe the things that they say and they have some independence in the things that they say.
And in the Ezra Klein, Chris Hayes podcast I was listening to this week, they also say something like that really stuck with me that, the attention economy can no longer be bought and it must be earned. And I think what the right wing has found is a bunch of people who earned a lot of attention, and whether they co-opted directly or co-opted over time or just slowly, like partially influenced, like we said, like they don't actually fully control Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or Theo Vaughn. Like all of those people are actually independent voices who simply know that relationship to the Republican Party is a juggernaut for views, right? Like it actually produces there's an incentive analysis there that I think the Democrats have just never really benefited from or actually invested in. And where Mamdani's race, which is really interesting to me, created that incentive structure. They only spent $2,000 on digital ads at all, right? And like compared to the absolute like millions of dollars they probably created in earned media from their own viral videos, and then a bunch of creators sort of picking up the mantle because they believed in what he was saying. That is the sort of structure that the Democrats could have if they would just like release the reins a little bit. And they, frankly, up to this point, have refused, and I think are going to have like a very rude awakening in 2026 if they don't let up a little bit. And I don't know that anyone's going to let go of that kind of power. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like people in this day and age, like politics, it is a form of entertainment for a lot of people. And I mean, and it has been for a while, cable news, that's the model. It's infotainment, like especially on the opinion side of things. Like, people watch the shows they watch because, they have kind of a parasocial relationship with the host. And like, this is not something that's new. And, it's like, I mean, you even go back to talk radio, like the reason that people are, because like, I mean, when you think about Joe Rogan's show, just as an example, like these shows are interminable and they're about nothing most of the time, right? It's like Joe sitting there, scrolling on his screen and being like, oh, I saw that there was this, new vitamin thing that they found in Malaysia. What do you think about that? Oh, I don't know. I never heard of that before. Jamie, look it up. That's the Joe Rogan podcast. Like it
That
fucking
is
sucks.
like the whole thing.
It sucks. And like
a lot of dead space. Yeah, it's shocking.
yeah. But you know what? Like, but some people are willing to listen to it and like it because they were conditioned through talk radio.
Sure.
Like that's Rush Limbaugh. Like that's Rush Limbaugh just with more weed.
And I also think it's like familiar and kind of builds that parasocial relationship. Like when I started listening to right wing media just to like better understand it, one of the things that shocked me the most was how vulnerable Dan Bongino can get on his show. He will like talk about his wife. He'll like talk about like kind of personal things, intermittent, these weird supplement ads and intermittent, these like weird political takes. Like there's just a like, or he'll shout out his like chat a lot. There's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of like the real investment in parasocial relationship building that it feels like when the Democrats engage with this, they're like above it and they just want to really like tightly control all levels of engagement and ignore how important that relationship is, the parasocial elements of it.
Yeah, and the bi-directional elements.
Yeah, exactly. People want to be seen and heard and reflected in the person they're speaking with. And we just kind of ignore that. And I think, again, I keep going back to Mamdani's race because I'm kind of obsessed with how they kind of went about things. One of the things that struck me the most is we talk about their platform as being like brought from the working class, which I think feels true. And maybe they did do a study. Maybe free buses, grocery stores, and like freezing the rent did come out of some like more thorough analysis of what people wanted. But most likely it was probably a little bit heuristic, right? And the way that they kind of got past that is they did the man on the street style video and they captured a perception of their engagement with people and then ran on this platform. And I think that's kind of the brilliance of social media is that you can create these perceptions and that's the fight that we're actually having with the Republicans all the time. It's not these like actual things happening in the background. It's this like KFAB, WWE style perception of reality. And I do think the Mamdani campaign actually did do those things in the background, but it also kind of didn't matter because they were able to create this world that people like believed in. And we're just terrible at that. Like, I just don't think the Democrats understand how to do it. And I think Trump in particular, but now the Republicans kind of writ large, and especially the advocacy media class, are able to like toy with that perceived reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a way we just have not mastered.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, though, I did want to make sure we talk about your personal project,
Sure.
Creator Congress. So tell us about that and what you are doing with it.
Yeah. So, last year I was seeing a lot of content coming out from primarily Democratic creators or Democrat aligned creators. And I just couldn't get over the fact that it felt kind of inauthentic. And it was often from creators I actually had like parasocial relationships with and enjoyed their content. And then suddenly they got involved in the Democratic stew. And I was just like, I don't get this. I don't want to share it. It doesn't feel like relatable to me. So I started just talking to people. My sister is a content creator on Twitch. I started doing some organizing, which is my background. It's what I do. And what I kind of came to is that there's really a missing like organization for creators to help them be authentic to themselves, particularly like a lot of creators were being iced out over their stance on Palestine. So I started to try to figure out what does it look like to have a space where creators who are further left of the Democrats, who want to share their authentic voice and still be in politics and not be completely marginalized into, kind of a Chapo faction of the party. Like, what does that look like? Where do they go? And I found that there were not many places. And so I created Creator Congress to be a bit of a home for folks in that in between space. And like, how do we get them political messaging? How do we help them with strategy? How do we engage them in the process outside of just like Big Tent, big party politics?
Mm-hmm. You've got several different people signed up as well. They're down for it, right?
Yeah, I've recruited about 60 creators at this point. The followings range from like 10,000 to 3 million. So like big followings, kind of like all the way to smaller followings. But the goal is to have a shared place. We've been working on ways to help people get possibly healthcare and resourced, because I know that those things are really important. And it's difficult. It's a lot harder to find funding in this space, but I am down for the challenge. I really want to figure out how we can help people in that, because I actually think that's the future of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. And what did the creators who are signed up, like, what do they think about it all?
I have gotten nothing but like glowing feedback. People are just really excited to have a space where they are brought into strategy. Like, we just had a creator brief a few weeks ago where instead of like talking at them and feeding them stats, I brought on a couple of experts and another creator to MC. And it was just like a really like open space where people could ask questions. And the content we got out of that brief was just like incredible. I think we ended up with 10 million views on the topic and people interpreting in their own way. There was no top down talking points. And yeah, I think we just got phenomenal feedback. And I think we hope to do more of those in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because ultimately, the weird paradox of the way that Republicans and Democrats do their own politics inside is that Republicans are more democratic in a lot of ways than
Yep.
Democrats are.
Yeah.
And, and the public, I think, can see that in some ways, to a large degree. I think they can see it.
There's a supportive network, right? Where I think what we kind of recreate in the Democrat creator organizing space is a really competitive environment, one where the creator with the highest following is actually like the most resourced, and the people with very few followers who actually are probably more trusted by their base, they're not getting any resources. They had to pay for their own DNC trip, which, the RNC would never let that happen. If you have even a remotely like large following, the RNC would have probably paid your way. But like large creators, 500,000 followers plus, were paying their own way and getting like limited access. It's not a good system. It's like we do a tiering. We're always about hierarchy. We're not welcoming. So trying to figure out how to do this in a way that is not like that.
Yeah. Well, and so what's the website address for it?
www.creatorcongress.net.
Okay, cool. And then what social media platforms would you want people to follow you on?
Yeah, Instagram and TikTok. It's just creator.congress on Instagram and just Creator Congress on TikTok.
All right. Sounds good. Good to have you here, Rynn.
Yeah. So appreciate the time. Thanks, Matt.
All right. So that is the program for today. I appreciate everybody joining us for the conversation. And you can always get more if you go to theoryofchange.show, where we have the video, audio, and transcript of all the episodes. And my thanks to everybody who is a paid subscribing member. Thank you very much for your support. You have unlimited access. And if you would like to become a paid subscriber, just go to theoryofchange.show, or you can go to patreon.com/discoverflux. And if you can't afford to subscribe right now, I understand that. But you can still help out by spreading the word of the show to your friends and to your family, and sharing some of the links that we post about it on social media. That is much appreciated. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do click the like and subscribe button so you can get notified whenever we have a new episode. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.